Over these last months, there's been several stories told about one called King Akbar. Now, King Akbar conquered the great land of India many centuries ago, and he was a very formidable warrior. But King Akbar had a penchant for this scholastic things and the arts. So he gathered around him a group that were known in history as the 9 Jewels. One of those jewels was Tansen, the extraordinary musician. There were 2 brothers who were the greatest poets of the age, and there was a philosopher and others. But by far, his most prized advisor, and the greatest of his jewels, was one that was called Birbal. Birbal had been born as a peasant in a village and risen to the ranks of being the chief advisor of this great monarch. So you could say that Birbal, he had street smarts. He also obviously had an innate knowledge of the occult, and he was revered for his compassion and understanding of mankind. But King Akbar was a very volatile character, very moody, in fact, you could say. But there was one thing about Birbal that used to annoy him constantly, and that was whenever anything went wrong, Birbal would always say, "Oh, but, honorable monarch, everything is for the good." Well, one day, King Akbar cut his finger very badly, so it was very painful. And when he was looking for commiseration with Birbal merely said, "Well, great monarch, everything is for..." "I don't want to hear that!" And King Akbar immediately called 2 of his courtiers and said, "I'm sick of hearing this, throw this fellow in jail." So Birbal was incarcerated down in the dungeons. Anyway, to take the king's mind off his sore finger, he decided to go on a hunt with some of his courtiers. So they went off on the hunt, but during the time they were hunting and the king was following a deer out into the forest, he lost sight of his companions and he got lost deep in the forest. And of course, after a while, although the deer got away, the king was very tired and very thirsty, so he got down off his horse and sat down under a tree where he nodded off to sleep. But when he woke up, he was surrounded by a group of savages who immediately took him back to their village and started boiling a big cauldron because they were going to offer him to the gods, their gods. Well, just as they were about to put King Akbar in the cauldron and offer him to their deities, they noticed his bandaged finger. And they talked amongst themselves, and of course, one of the laws in that village was that nothing that was imperfect could be offered to the gods. So, of course, they set King Akbar free. And he got on his horse and rode back to his palace, and of course he immediately let his friend Birbal out of the dungeons because, of course, he'd gotten over his little hissy fit. But when he told, of course, Birbal his story, Birbal said the same thing. "Well, honorable monarch, everything happens for the good." And King Akbar said, "How can you say that? You've been languishing in jail all of these days, in this dungeon." "Oh," said Birbal, "no, because if I hadn't been in jail, I would have been on the hunt with you, and I would have been your companion when you were captured, and because I'm a perfect specimen, they would have boiled me instead of me. And we all know very well that very well-known story about Mullah Nasruddin, who loses his front door keys, and he's looking for them under the street lamp. And a policeman comes along and says, "What are you doing?" And the Mullah Nasruddin looks up from being on his knees and says, "I'm looking for my keys." So the policeman got down on his hands and knees, and they were both looking around. The policeman said, "Where exactly did you lose them?" Mullah Nasruddin said, "Well, I lost them over there in that dark alleyway, but it's more light over here." And that strange little very deep story leads us into the next phase of where it is that we must go. And so this next story is to open the way for us. There was a man who was doomed to die. So he was blindfolded, and he was put into a dark cave, and a stone was rolled over the entrance. But before he was put in the cave, he was told that in the dark there was a way out of this cave, if he could but find it. But he was told also that for 1 month he would be given only bread and water, and after that he would be given nothing. So the cave entrance was sealed up. But far up in the ceiling, about 18 feet, there was a very small aperture where light could be seen, and where the bread and water would be lowered down to him. But the light was not great enough to illuminate the inside of the cave. But when his blindfold was removed, and he was told that he could remove it once he was left inside and the door was sealed, he felt around in the dark, and he felt that there were a lot of rocks on the ground. And he calculated that he was 5'9" tall, and if he built a mound that was high enough, he could stand and he could almost reach that aperture, and if he opened it up, he would be able to make his escape. So for the next 2 weeks, he gathered the rocks and piled them up into a mound. But he was getting very weak. And then, of course, there were not too many rocks left, so he had to dig with his hands to find more and place on the top of the mound. But when he'd completed the mound and climbed, because he was weak, he fell. And he had no more strength to rise himself up and climb to the top. 3 days later, he passed away. When the stone was rolled aside from the cave, as had been said, just at the base of where the light above him was situated, to the side, a little bit to the south, in the dark, the pitch dark, there was an opening. And if he had have found that opening, he would have found a passageway that took him through the great mountain in which the cave was situated to find his freedom. This story has very great import for us over these coming days. Because you might say that the thing that we're going to explore, the thing that we must explore and discover, is the illusion of light. Over these coming days, when we get back together again, our endeavor will be to discover for ourselves the illusion